Welcome to Finding Your Retirement Journey. What are you afraid of? Well, most of us have some concerns, but let's look at the Money Guide tool to see how it may help us. We're going to use the example of Mary and Doug and their journey. They have a household income of $120,000. They're both age 41. 2 children. They wanted to put one through private college, one through public college, and they're both saving 3% into their 401k. We did a goals exercise with them, and they came up with their own needs, wants, and wishes. Often we just kind of think of retirement or financial freedom, as I like to call it, is just one grouping of everything, rather than, well, what are the things we absolutely need? What are the things we want to do? So in their case, along the journey, putting their children through college. And then we have our wishes. So the wishes actually, in this case, would go on top of their retirement needs, basic living expenses. After doing some work with them, we got to the area of doing risk and return. You might simply call it, well, what kind of investments? So from the words defensive all the way to equity, we can see in the third column something called a probability of success. So the computer program goes in and says, based upon what we know about different investment qualities, let's call it for now, when we assemble them one way, it gives us one kind of return. We assemble them another way, it gives us a different kind of return. And ultimately, how does that reflect in the probability of success of them reaching those needs, wants, and wishes? The square box is around 76%, which was the highest probability of success. And that corresponds to investing in something called equity before they retire. Equity corresponds to an all-stock portfolio, but there's an allocation of what all those stocks look like. It's just not, okay, stocks, period. And then going to moderate during their retirement years. And you see that we had looked at moderate for all periods or all periods during retirement and wanted to see what things would look like in comparison to what we went before. But there's some grouping around moderate growth to capital appreciation, but they decided to go with the equity. So we land on a screen that kind of gives us a summary of everything. So the recommended scenario became 76%, needs, wants, and wishes that we talked about briefly before. But now let's look at, what are you afraid of? Well, curiously, we see the 76% as the needs, wants, and wishes. You may not have thought about it that way, but that's like getting everything. But if we just isolated on their needs, they're at 99%. If we just isolated at their retirement needs and their desire to get their children through college, that's at 92%. That's pretty phenomenal. And their needs, wants, and wishes at 76. So there's different ways we could look at the wishes. Maybe they could wish a little bit less, because I think they said $32,000 was the dollar amount that they wanted. What if that was 16 or 24? How might that have increased the probability of success? Maybe they would have decided to work a little bit longer. So there's different ways that you might be able to get even higher on the needs, wants, and wishes. But we're going to really look at the what are you afraid of? In this case, on the left-hand side, we see great recession losses. So think of 2008, 9, and what people were experiencing in their stock market returns there. Inflation, or the effect of rising prices, cuts to Social Security, low returns, dying early or living a long life, usually don't complain about living a long life unless someone said, well, I want to be healthy. Well, in a way, we never know what you're going to be in the future, but most people probably want to live a long life. And healthcare and long-term care costs. Healthcare and long-term care are separate categories in retirement. So just a quick reminder, needs, wants, and wishes, and how those lined up with our probability of success meter. So before I move to the next one, I thought we should return back to the equity and the risk reward analysis. So this time I added a section which talks about bear market losses. So if you notice down the column of Great Recession returns, -1 was the lowest, -51 was the highest. Geez, no one seemed to really like that -51. But what's interesting though is even with the -1, the probability of success was only 31%. With the higher Great Recession return of -51, they got a higher probability of success. So it's kind of interesting when you start to look at how will this affect my plan versus how does my portfolio go up and down. So we're going to start with that Great Recession loss. This gives it exactly its 50.95% rather than 51% that was curved up to before. And now we see that their needs is still 99%, but their needs and wants goes down to 48, and needs, wants, and wishes at 28. So this is an event that would happen today, and what the expectation of it going back to what it was in the cycle that it was before. There's definitely some assumptions underneath here regarding what we would call asset classes, cash and stock and bonds, and the different types of those in terms of what that exact 50.95 would come from. But it shows us that if we did hit that this would definitely impact their plan and the things that they wanted. Rather than fear, we could say, well, what are ways we could plan around it? One of the ways would be to save more. The more money you're putting in the plan, either because they start to save more on an annual basis, or they work longer, which effectively continue to do the same thing, increases the amount of savings that gets pumped into the plan. Or they, again, as I said prior, maybe they say, you know, from a wishes standpoint, yeah, we wanted to do the 32K, but if we did 16, we'd be happy, or 24, or some number. But at least they should have some comfort that they won't, quote unquote, find themselves on the street. But if we decrease the loss down to, say, 28%, things look better. Things look better. So some of this we have to live through because we don't know what the future will hold, but we can see and test various scenarios and at least mentally think about scenarios and how we would react to them prior to them happening rather than waiting and reacting in the moment. Typically, when we react in the moment, we actually don't get the best results. Let's look at inflation. So if the base inflation rate goes up, 2%, what if it goes to 3? Well, 3 doesn't look as good as 2, and the base inflation rate was 2 rather than 3. So create some problems. So know that as prices rise, things start to exponentially go up. So anything in the future is going to have a bigger problem with those things closer in time period to today. Not too bad regarding the children and their college, but it really severely impacts those wants and wishes. And we probably just don't want to even know that 4% is a possibility. There are some other thoughts or possibilities that if inflation rises, then that would adjust some other things such as investment returns. At least historically that has been the case, yet we don't know that history will always repeat itself, but we can begin to think about these different scenarios. Should I save more today and to potentially hedge that off? So again, many different ways for us to consider. Social Security cuts. That is increasingly becoming a concern for people. So let's say that it got cut 40%. Social Security is not going to affect the children, but it definitely would affect mom and dad from their wants and wishes perspective. We're still looking good on the needs side of the equation. And Social Security, well, geez, well, how will we plan around that? I think it's the same thing, just needing more funding that we would have ourselves. And that could just take many different avenues, and that's part of the planning exercise. Then there's low returns. So we had an expectation of what the returns were going to be, but what if those returns were a bit less? So if they would be 1% less, or really drop by one percentage point is more accurate, 1 percentage point, still fine on the needs. But again, wishes seems to always get impacted. 2% wishes impacted the most. So now let's look at dying early or living long. Right now we have them living to 97 and 100. Sorry guys, typically women live longer. Women, sorry, there's no promise that you will outlive your husband. Life happens, but mortality tables suggest that this would be the case. So not trying to knock anyone off. Hopefully you got the joke there. So if Doug were to die today, that would affect their needs to the degree of 72%, down from 99. One of the ways to fix that would potentially be an increase in the amount of life insurance. We didn't discuss that today, but inside the plan, we have calculated life insurance. So one of the ways to try to fix that is to have more. Definitely impacts the goal for the children. And needs, wants, and wishes. From the wishes perspective, Mary probably wouldn't still want the 32,000. Let's say it's 16 to 20, not always going to be cut in half. So maybe this isn't as dramatic, but definitely from the needs perspective and the children's college would be a problem. If living a bit longer to age 60, we see improved results. So not having to go all the way to the expected retirement date. So this actually, to me, kind of highlights something else, which is the amount of life insurance that you potentially would need today won't be the same amount of insurance that you would need in 10 or 20 years. As time goes on, the money that your family expected, as well as you expected to make, becomes realized and decreases the overall replacements of income that your life insurance would do. There's many purposes for life insurance. I believe in replacements, life insurance for the income that's expected to come and fund all of these goals. And then finally, there's our health care and long-term care. So if we started this at age 90, lasting for 3 years, costing $140,000, and the numbers are pretty high. But that is looking at what the dollar amounts depending upon what state you live in. This is an accurate number of today. So hopefully you got something out of the what are you afraid of, and that we can analyze it and look at what the impact and more and less and what we should come up with in scenarios and potentially adjusting our expectations. But I have some offers to you, and one is to have you leverage our free tool called MyBlocks. If you become a client, we leverage this as a client as well, and go even more in depth. But MyBlocks kind of breaks down several aspects of financial planning, providing some education. There's even some what I'd call light tools that can help you in many different areas, potentially understanding more about Social Security and healthcare, long-term care, if that was something that you're like, what was that number that he was throwing out there? Well, you can dive deeper here, as well as pursue things like financial freedom, paying off debt, establishing emergency funds, and lots of other tools that have to do with managing your cash flow. To access that, simply go to the website, look for the client portal login. When you get to that page, you'll click register and self-register yourself. If you prefer to start a conversation with us, have conversations from what you've looked at, please feel free to either email us at info@envisionwealth.us or call 312-448-1010, 312-448-1010. Thank you for your time.